Hey, everybody, welcome back to the next View from the Top podcast, where we help growth-minded men who desire momentum in their business, their family, and their finance get through the valleys and up the mountain to their very own view from the top. I'm again so glad that you're listening in today with us. We're going to dig into a question from a listener today, and it's around the idea of, have you ever felt hopeless? Maybe it was in a situation in a relationship. Maybe it was a financial concern. Maybe it was an employee. And we ask ourselves, man, what do I do in a situation that just seems hopeless? So listen in as Big A and I dive into this topic. And speaking of Big A, he's here with me. Big A, let's get rolling.
It's all good, man. I'm pretty excited. You know, I like to bow hunt. And went out Sunday. I was going to make an afternoon out of it. I was in the tree 5 minutes and shot a deer, and I came home. And Robin's like, "Did you forget something?" I said, "No, I'm finished. I've killed the deer." So I'm pretty amped up. It was your
pet. It must have been your pet. 5 minutes. It followed you to the tree stand.
No. You know what? When I got in the tree, I got all relaxed, and I looked over my left shoulder, and there was a deer. And I was like, "This is only going to take a second." And so, Robin says similar things. She doesn't like it when I kill him with a gun. She said, "That's no sport."
Unfair advantage, maybe.
Yeah, she said, you can see a deer. I mean, how's the deer only have a chance?
You're only shooting out here, I mean, furthest you can shoot with a gun out here is even like
100 yards.
Maybe 100 yards.
Yeah, 100 yards. But she doesn't think the deer's got a chance. But I've hunted all my life. But I really enjoy bow hunting. And she thinks there's a lot more skill in that. And there's a lot more. The deer's got a chance. This deer didn't have a chance, though. He was 20 yards away. And all you animal fans out there, don't send me hate mail, okay? I love to bow hunt. We do eat the deer. We don't just leave them. And so it's good. I love to fish. I love to hunt. But that's not what we're talking about today.
No, it's not.
But you asked me how it's going. So it's going good. Yeah. It's going good. Hey, there is a lot of stuff going on right now, though. And this stuff with Israel that's going on. Robin and I had a trip planned. We were going there first part of 2024 with a dozen of our friends, and then with a lot of other people at our church. And we made the decision not to go, so we're canceling.
Really?
Yeah, we're canceling. But even if they don't cancel the trip, we're not going right now. But like,
pretty rough.
It's really taken a toll on Robin. We don't watch the news a lot, but we watch it a little bit, especially right now. We're trying to
big events are happening.
Yeah. So we're just trying to kind of get a grip on what's going on. We've been to Israel before, so it would be a huge disappointment if we'd never been, but we have been there. I love it. It's one of our favorite places to go, or at least that time we went, we said this is one of the favorite trips we've ever taken, but we were really looking forward to going back with all of our friends. But we're not going. But it kind of dovetails in a little bit to today's episode about embracing hope in seemingly hopeless situations. Do you have any sense, or do you and Sonia right now, is this Israel thing got you concerned? Is it something y'all are paying attention to? Do you watch much of it? Yeah,
it's a good question. We do watch a little and pay attention a little bit. We don't as much as we used to, just to, big events in the world in general, right? I think that even some of the books we've read in the last couple of years and things we've talked about on this podcast before is not sure God's designed us to take on so much, right? But I think there's situations, there's so much of things that are happening in the world that maybe we're not able to handle all of it at one time. But there's things like this with Israel and stuff that I think are definitely things that we pay attention to more often. And we just took a trip out to Israel for the first time back in February this past year. And just like anything, no matter what's happening anywhere in the world, when you've been somewhere and some atrocity or some big event happens in that place, your ability to relate to that a little more contextually, even though you're not relating to the loss that those people are experiencing or the tragedy and the atrocities that are happening there. You can't relate to that, but just have a better context. And so I think you feel more deeply, which allows you to hopefully pray more deeply and whatnot. And I think that, whether it's Israel, whether it's other things that are happening around us, that I think they align up with the topic of these things can really lead people to feel hopeless.
Yeah, that's the way Robin feels a little bit in watching the news. And matter of fact, she got up the other night and just turned it off. She goes, I just can't take anymore. I just cannot watch these innocent children be beheaded and innocent women being raped and killed. And it really, really affects her emotionally. And she feels a sense of hopelessness. She feels a sense of like they don't have any help. And the other thing, I think it's important, what you just said, I hadn't thought about this, but we've been actually standing right there, right in the very spot, on the border of Syria and Jordan and the Gaza Strip. I mean, we've been those places, and we know firsthand. We got pictures of places that this stuff is happening, and it makes it more real.
Yeah.
And when you're separated and you've never been, you've not actually been there, maybe there's a little better separation, but it feels like you've been invaded almost. Your own private space is what it feels like. There's this sense of hopelessness.
Yeah, there's I didn't know what a kibbutz was until we went to Israel. And the guide we had, who was a Messianic Jew, which means he's a believer, Jewish, but a believer. And he was, on our tours that we took, he was talking and explaining a lot about kibbutzes and what they were and why people belong to them. And if I had not had that experience, so I'm sure there's a lot of people in the world right now, in the US especially, have no idea really what a kibbutz is. And I think the negative side of that was we would think of like a commune or something. It's different than that, but it's a community of people that they've decided to live together and live in a certain way. And so when you have even that more context, I'm sure there's people listening to this are like, I didn't even know what a kibbutz was.
Yeah, they're living there. Most of the time people go away. Well, they bring their spouse, right?
Yeah. It's really, and to think that like that was, intentionally invaded, and it's crazy. And it does create it absolutely can create those feelings of hopelessness, and that affects everything else like around us for sure. Yeah.
Well, hey, I want to give a shout out to Scott Hooper. Scott lives in Stephenville, Texas, pastor for about 30 years. He's in Iron Sharpens Iron Mastermind. He's been a member probably 7 or 8 years. He's a phenomenal guy. And he sent this question in. He said, what are 3 things that I can do to embrace hope in a seemingly hopeless situation? And we want to kind of dive into that a little bit. So, Scott, thank you for submitting that question. It's a great question. Some of you may have a question. We've got the opportunity for you to submit those too, and we'll be happy to try to talk about your question as well. But, Wally, hope is often perceived as kind of a fleeting emotion. Have you ever been there? Have you ever been in a situation where you felt hopeless?
We said I'm going to start crying. We said we were going to be transparent on here, right?
Yeah.
There's been a couple of times when I felt that way. One, even though I had a good parent divorce situation, there was a time when I felt hopeless about a relationship with my biological dad. Even though I was part of his life growing up, he was there. I spent time with him every week. Having a relationship that felt hopeless at times. That was one time for sure. I remember.
How old were you?
Oh, geez. Well, our relationship really didn't become a true relationship, until about 4 years ago. When,
but this was an emotion you felt early, like
oh
as a
yeah,
kid or a
oh yeah,
teenager?
yeah. And it, it was those things where like, so I had my dad and mom both got remarried. So I had step brothers and sisters on both sides, and half brothers and sisters, but I had a step brother on my dad and my stepmom's side, and my dad trying to, I could say doing the best he could to figure it out. There were things that he would do with my stepbrother, the gifts he would give him, things from like his military days and things like that back then that my stepbrother didn't really appreciate at that time in his life.
Sure.
That's different for him now. But at that time in his life, he didn't appreciate it. He didn't treat them with respect, and they were either destroyed or lost. And so, like that was a connection I felt like I could have had to my dad. And so that started then. That's what I noticed first, was just like those things that you have. You have a hat. You have something of your dad's.
Yeah. I got a really cool hat.
Yeah. Like imagine, like you have this. It's not a weird connection, but it's a point of connection that you, even though he's gone now, you still feel some of that. So
we've got it in like a trophy case.
Yeah, I know, right?
It's got all these fishing lures all over it, and he made it when he was a teenager.
And there's a whole story behind that. It was great to hear that. Listeners will love that stuff. But anyway, like I don't have anything like that. Never got anything like that from him. And so I that was a point of connection I felt like I could have had with him. And so it wasn't until 4 years ago I decided finally that, you know what, when I go back and visit my parents in New York, both of them still live there, 15 minutes apart from each other, which is great. And I need to go out to breakfast or lunch with each of my dads. I both call them dad. I don't delineate step anymore, or any of that, because they both impacted my life in crazy ways. So I said, I'm going to go out to lunch or breakfast with one of them at a time. So I went out with my dad, and it was the first time that I actually had that I can remember really had one-on-one like time with him. And on his own, he initiated it. He apologized for leaving my mom and me when I was younger at 5. And it was like,
that was a moment.
Yeah, it was like relationship began.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
So cool.
It was really cool.
That is so cool.
Yeah. One other time that I felt hopeless was in my marriage, and it had to do with intimacy. And we had gone through I'd made a really bad decision in our marriage. And it was probably 5 years after that, we had started to get some healing and things. And I've talked a little about this on the podcast before, but some of the counseling and stuff we were getting, and it wasn't helping us in the way we needed to be helped, primarily because of other things that were influencing and impacting how Sonia was responding to our relationship, some of the things I had done. And so what happened is she was really looking to me to be perfect before she became a follower, like a wife, right? In terms of like, not submitting and that kind of thing, but there's like a mutual, in a relationship with husband and wife, like there's a mutual coming togetherness. And so she couldn't do that because she kept hearing, from all the marriage Bible studies that we had done, husband, you do what you're supposed to do and your wife will follow. What she heard was, husband, you do what you're supposed to. Well, I wasn't perfect. And so because of that, she could. And so in that period of time, I remember we were in the basement of our house and she was doing laundry. I remember it clear as day, man. Kind of a, not dingy basement, but like one of those Michigan basements where it's not finished and kind of bare walls and open rafters and, a couple of hanging lights like you're in getting interrogated, kind of a thing. And so I'm sitting in there and I'm backed up against the wall and I'm sitting on the floor and we're talking. And I just got to a point where she could not understand anything I was saying. And I was pouring my heart out to her. And I'm literally end up in the fetal position and I'm just bawling. And she literally is just continuing to do laundry. And I was like, that felt hopeless. Yeah. God's restored. Praise God. Yeah. Things are way different now. 31 years of marriage. Yeah. But those are moments.
Yeah. Here's the thing, Wally, that we said when we started this podcast, we didn't want to be a facade. We didn't want to be this veil we were hiding behind and appear to have it all together and great amount of success. And we've got a lot of things and everything is sunshine and rainbows for us, It's just not the case.
It's not.
And we want to encourage those that are out there that if you're faced with a hopeless situation right now, there's victory on the other side.
That's right.
Man.
There is.
I mean, you went through tough stuff. And
very tough stuff.
Shared a few of those things. I was thinking as we were talking about this episode a little bit, and I haven't felt hopeless a lot in my career or in my life. There's a few times I made some bad choices relationally. And I felt hopeless as a result of, will my marriage be all that God intended it to be? And I don't know that I've ever told you this or not. You're going to hear it first time on a podcast. But I remember, and we talked about hunting earlier, the irony of that. But I remember going out in the woods hunting, and I thought, I could be out of this feeling right now.
Oh, yeah.
And it's one of the few times I've ever had those kind of thoughts. It was fleeting, but I said, I can see how people get in situations to where they're embarrassed and they've let their family down, and they're going to have to, face the music, and they're going to have to walk through and deal with things. And I was just sitting there, even thought, this would appear to be a hunting accident. I even thought that far through it. And, praise God, I didn't take action on that, and quickly kind of talked through that. And I said, no, man, that doesn't solve anything. All that does is create a lot more havoc for my family. And
right on.
Yeah. And I can see how people can get in a state of depression and how they can be very anxious, and they've done things that are out of their normal character, can have those thoughts. And I want to encourage the listeners today that there's other answers, right? And you may feel hopeless right now. You may be in a situation with your marriage, or you may have a financial crisis that's looming on the horizon. There could be children that you have that you just don't understand how they got there and where they're at in their life. And you start taking responsibility for that yourself. And I just want to encourage you that there's counselors, there's people out there that can walk you through this. And there is other ways out when you feel this sense of hopelessness. Back in December, my youngest daughter was diagnosed with an incurable liver disease. And not immediately, but about 4 to 5 months into that, palliative care came in. And I didn't even know what palliative care was. I'd never been around that terminology. And I had to ask them, I said, I don't really even know what that term is, when they said we're from palliative care. And they said, well, we're just before hospice. And I'm like, what are you saying? And they said, well, what we're saying is that if she doesn't get a transplant in the next 6 months, she's not going to be here.
That's serious.
Well, yeah, there was a sense of hopelessness at that moment, right?
Yeah.
And so, we supposed to cry. What are we doing on this podcast? The truth is,
real life, man.
Yeah, it was really took our family through some trials, and praise God, she had a liver transplant now at the recording of this 7 weeks ago, and she's doing remarkable.
Right on.
All of her numbers are great. We're on the other side of that. So I want to encourage all of you today, man, if you're going through things, it's dark when you're in the storm. When you're in the valley, man, it's just really, really hard. And whatever it is, maybe we haven't touched on today what it is that you're going through, but I just want to tell you that get people around you. The thing that was the most important for Robin and I, and I'm sure it was for you as well, is having people that could walk that journey with you, people that really could embrace you and could hold your arms up when you're tired and loan you their courage when you don't have any, and offer words of empathy and compassion, and they could really walk with you through these dark days. Listen, if we didn't have friends, I don't know what I would have done. I don't know where we would be today without having these trusted advisors and friends and family that really get around us. And I started thinking, Wally, about some of the things that I've done over my career. I know I probably look older than I am, but when I started thinking about 44 years, all the challenges in my career that I've gone through, and Wally and I both are Christian by faith, and some of the things that we do as Christians, and you may have a different pathway, and we'll uncover that in just a second. But me is, I always default to prayer first. I'm like, hey, God, I need you, and I need you to help me work through this, to give me the courage that I need. I always resort back to Scripture.
Well, can we ask you a question on that?
Yeah.
You say I always go to prayer first. Do you always?
Well, that was maybe not a fair comment. I hope to, and usually I do, but no, there's been occasions I didn't. Matter of fact, sometimes, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, I'm glad you called me out on it. Sometimes it's the last resort, right? We go to prayer. I should correct that and say we should go to prayer first. Always. Wally's a wordsmith. He calls me out on these things, and it's good. I'm glad you brought my attention to that. That's my desire. That's my hope.
Yeah.
The next thing is Scripture, is reading God's Word. The Bible, there's 66 books in there. We have to run it through the full counsel of God to really find out, is there something here that I can apply to this situation that I'm in? The other thing that I try to do, and this is difficult, especially when you're in the storm, is to quiet your mind, to get in a safe place. For me, this is funny. For me, my hot tub, right, is a safe place. We even wired it for TV, and I could have sound out there. And I said, I'm not putting anything out here. I don't even carry my phone out there. No music. It's just a quiet place for me. And Robin said, I don't think you're supposed to stay in that hot tub an hour. I said,
I would shrivel.
I said, I got a lot to pray about when I'm in
raisin.
there. So it's just really good. Sometimes I get in there early mornings before daylight, sometimes late at night before bed. So it's just different. The other place is the lake. I really enjoy going to the lake and being quiet. I put on praise and worship music, and usually during the week, there's nobody out there but me. I'm the only crazy guy out there at 5 o'clock in the morning and fish 2 or 3 hours and just really quiet my mind. Some of the best things that I've ever done came as a result of that quietness, because God said He speaks to us in a small, still voice. And when we're constantly busy, we don't have any bandwidth, there's no margin, we don't hear it, right? It's not that He's not talking, it's just we're not listening. We're too busy. And so probably the last thing for me also is that I think through things with other people. Like, I seek counsel. And I can't tell you how valuable that's been for me, because Wally, I call you a lot and I'll say, hey, I'm just flushing this out, like I'm not sure. And when I talk it out loud, and I got other trusted advisors, I go to our mastermind group, Iron Sharpens Iron. For 25 years now, every week I've been in a mastermind group, and it's allowed me to have a safe place to be able to go and flush these things out when I feel that sense of hopelessness. I'm looking for direction. Those are kind of the steps that I take, and that's not for everybody, but those are kind of the steps that I take. What about you? Is there anything you want to add to that, or things you do differently?
Yeah, at times that I felt hopeless, I mentioned a couple times when I was younger and I didn't have the maturity, or I didn't have people around me that were speaking into me about these things. So I've learned them as I've gotten older, and I think it helps to remove and distill some of that hopelessness that we can feel. And I'm with you 100% that my desire is to talk with God. Reading His Word and understanding and reading through the promises from Scripture, as well as there's other readings that people have written around Scripture that are helpful to recite to yourself, to remind yourself of the promises of God, the goodness of God. Because I think that talking with Him in prayer and then reading His Word, like, those are the foundational pieces that are going to help us ultimately through any situation, right? Without those, your point of the whole counsel, one of our core values at View from the Top is, truth before opinion. And so looking at God's Word as the lens through which we look at, if we're not looking through that first, then everything else is just opinion. We can get counsel from other people, and we should, but we should still run that through that filter and that lens. Another thing I think is really important that God showed me early on in my life, and I didn't have a lot of people early on. In the last, 8 years or so of my life, He's provided, guys mostly through the mastermind group that I've been in for 8 years, and to not just become guys in my mastermind or in my network, but to become friends. And these are guys that I've learned that when you get counsel from others, make sure you're getting counsel from people who at that moment have hope, that also are not hopeless.
Point. Yeah.
It's so easy to
you get in the mud with each other.
Oh, that's not good, man.
You dig a hole quick.
That's a very dangerous place to be. Yeah. And the reality is sometimes a lot of our family members, the people we tend to spend time with a lot, like might be in a hopeless situation. People at work that are easy to talk to because they're there, might not have the same lens that you have. And
then we're taking advice from them.
Yeah.
Just because we're around them.
And here's the thing, getting counsel and advice from others that we're going to entrust into, that don't have the same biblical hope that I have, means that there's no way for them to look through the same lens.
No, they're going to give you different advice. It's important that they have similar core values.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. We were talking through some of the things that we see guys dealing with problematically every single day. And one big one is broken relationships. There's a lot of, it's sad to say, but 55% of all marriages, I think that's even increased. I heard the other day,
it
65.
Is. I think it's higher, yeah.
I heard 65% of all marriages end in divorce. And in our society today, there's different roles. You have to decide what that is for you and your spouse. But in this society that we're living in today, men are pushed to kind of be the provider. They're pushed really to be the protector, and they're looked at to be the strongest. Right? That's a lot. When you start thinking about all that, you're like, man, I got a big role.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of pressure that we're confronted with, and I don't know about you, if you really think through the responsibility that we're confronted with each and every day with, and I know, man, there's some ladies out there that are crushing it. They're doing great, man, in their occupations. They're great moms. And I'm not demeaning that at all. I'm not dismissing that at all. You're doing a great job. But, we're just talking primarily today to some of the guys and some of the things that they could level up in, some of the areas that they could. Then we think about some of the relationships and some of the reasons. We had a mastermind meeting yesterday, and one of the guys was on there talking, and they've been confronted with a lot of pressure recently, a lot of distractions.
Yep.
And as a result of that, there's been far less intimacy in their relationship. And it's created a real barrier in their communication, in their relationship. And he's gone and said, hey, what is it that we can talk through? And, there's homeschooling involved, and then there's this house situation that they're confronted with, and he's got a lot of pressure at work, and that manifests itself into our relationships. Yeah. And then we reach this barrier that we're just like, now we're mad, right? Now it's like, hey, you don't understand what I'm going through. What do you suggest to guys in regards to this particular situation around communication? How have you and Sonia kind of sit down and work through relationship issues and topics and identified some of your roles and things like that?
I think one of the important, there's a number of things around this, but something that stands out to me the most is especially the longer that we're married, is the communication. And even the example you gave the guy yesterday, like the maturity of his relationship with his wife. They've been married, 12 years or something? Like
18.
18 years.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
So the maturity, like they're able to have those conversations. And even though those conversations, like I was there, like the answer kind of sucked.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't the answer he wanted to hear, but it was the current reality. And so now they can at least deal with it. I think so often, I know being earlier, when I was married earlier, and even now, there's certain things that I find myself fearful of approaching in our relationship. And most of the time, if there's anything that's going to breach toward hopelessness, it's going to be because there's not communication happening in our relationship.
And then we put it off until it's that burr under the saddle now has become a sore.
Yeah.
And rather than dealing with the small things, we wait till one of us blows up, one of us had all we can take, and then we address it. And then I want to encourage all of you to communicate regularly. That's the biggest thing. Here's the thing. People say I'm crazy oftentimes, Wally, and I've been married just a little longer than you, but you're on your way there, is oftentimes Robin and I, 44 years coming up
awesome.
in June. Yeah. And now we've gotten to a point, though, where we proactively talk about things, and I choose and pick when I do that. Like when we're fighting, I want to win, right? Don't you want to like get this? But now we argue for resolution, and used to I would fight to win. But we'll do it now when things are good. I'll say, hey, a couple of weeks ago this came up and it made me feel this way. I don't know if you meant that, but that's the way it felt. Help me understand. We have a much more civil conversation then than we do when we're fighting.
In the moment, yeah.
We're in the moment. Sure. And so I would just, as your relationship matures and you've got a few more years, pick and choose when you do this and present it in a way to allow them to be heard, right? And don't fight to win. Don't try to prove your point. Just say, give me more clarity. Help me understand this. Did I say something that provoked that? Am I not doing something? And another thing that I do, I know I'm crazy, but I'll even send letters to friends of mine and I'll ask them questions about how they view me. How do you see me treating Robin? Am I being compassionate? Do you see me being whatever it is that you want to find out about? Because the truth is, I want to get better. Like I genuinely want to get better. I don't want to just win. I want to have an intimate relationship, not just physically, but emotionally. I want to be in that relationship so that we really finish strong. What are some of the other things that you think cause people not to be able to do that?
So we're talking about we're going to get to, I think, people are listening and going, you guys were going to talk about like what to do when you feel hopeless. We're also talking about
situations that get you
right, exactly,
hopeless.
Like things that are causing some of the breakdown. So it's okay recognizing what's causing it, also recognizing what you can do so you don't cause it in the future. And then we'll get to like the way out in a minute here. But this idea, you mentioned it a little bit ago, this guy from yesterday, like no bandwidth.
0. He has no room.
Yeah. We have found ourselves challenged sometimes. Like we're empty nesters now. I know you guys are too.
Yeah.
And so as empty nesters, it's easy to think, well, you should have all the time in the world. We fill it. Right? We fill the void. We just do. And unfortunately, I remember being younger, cell phones just kind of became a thing when we had teenagers. And it didn't take long. I mean, it's worse now today, but it didn't take long for that device that's in your hand. So we talked about episode a few weeks ago about how many times we pick it up every day. 700, 1,000 times. A day? Was it a day?
Yeah, I was embarrassed. That's a week.
That's a week. Still.
That's a lot.
Still, that's insane.
Yeah.
So when you, like, what else do you do that many times a day? Like nothing, right? So when you think about that phone, that can be a just relationship connection killer. Because, right, when you're in connection, having no bandwidth, even when you have time, you're not creating bandwidth for your relationship, whether it's emotional intimacy or physical intimacy, and or both. Yeah. You know how many times you've seen it. Sonny and I try to be very cognizant of this. Once in a while, we'll go to a restaurant and we'll agree it's okay for us to be on our phones, and if people judge us, we're fine. We've had a long day. Like, we'll just make that decision. But 99% of the time, we're like, man, we go to a restaurant, like, unless there's a reason for us to be on a phone call, or we're waiting for a text or something, let's just leave them aside.
We leave it in the car.
You know how many people, you know why? I can't leave it in the car. You know why? I tell Sonia, man, anytime you like go to the restroom, like, you gotta take your phone with you. I'm one of those people that like I gotta sit like in the right spot to see the front door.
Yeah,
like I'm like I gotta have my phone. I don't know. I don't think so.
We need to talk about.
I can't leave my phone. I can't leave my phone.
I leave it in the car.
Man, I
If me
can't
and
do
Robin
that.
are going, because I'll tell you, man, you want to ruin a date night for me, you let me pick up that phone when we're eating dinner and it's over.
Oh yeah. Well, that's smart on your part then.
And
Like
so I
if
leave it in
that's
the car. I'm like,
way
because
to
I
go.
know as soon as she gets up to go to the bathroom, I'm going to check something. And I'm like, she comes back, I'm on that phone. It's like, date's over. Date night is
You do
done.
that too many times, you're going to end up in a what feels like a hopeless situation.
Yeah, I'll be on the other side of this interview. Listen, other things are loneliness or isolation. Those are joy killers. I mean, without a question.
Yeah.
We don't want others to know that we don't have it all together. And then we're lonely. We don't surround ourselves with people because of it. And then we get caught up in the comparison game. You're always like, well, they're doing this, or they've gone here, or they've got this thing. And then we're like, we don't measure up, and we feel a sense of,
What am I going to
them
get?
down.
Yeah. People look at
And
me.
so these are things that make us feel this hopeless. I'll tell you, that's one of the things with Facebook. Everybody gets on there and everybody's life is at the end of the rainbow. There's a pot of gold. We're all in Hawaii laying on the beach and everything is just amazing. And then you're like, why aren't I all laying on the beach in Hawaii? Like, what is going on? And you continually tell yourself, here's the truth. Only people are showing you things that are great for them. You never get a Facebook post of somebody arguing in the bedroom, pointing their finger at each other. It never happens. It's always this, like, why aren't we're just seeing their best reels. That's all we're seeing. And it makes us feel less than. Well, listen, this pain can be compounded by all these social expectations for men to express themselves in a vulnerable way. They've got to seek support. And I'm just telling you, man, loneliness, isolation, these things. And you wanted to talk about some ways, man, we can work our way out. So what are some of the things, Wally, that you feel that people dealing with these broken relationships or feeling a sense of isolation, what are some ways that
People feeling hopeless right now.
that they can do?
Yeah. I think accepting and processing it, like trying to ignore that it's, not happening to me.
So owning it.
Yeah. Like, how many times?
You just got to say, hey, this is
real.
happening.
How many times do we honestly, like, did you want to say earlier that I had this thought about that I could end things out in the woods?
No.
You didn't want to say that.
No.
But everybody listening to this podcast has moments, maybe not exactly that, but they all have moments where they reach a point where if they're not managing their emotions and they're like, not even managing them, but just because life happens to us, we have those moments where those thoughts come. And when they come and we find ourselves in a hopeless situation, accepting that it's real and not just say, I'm not gonna worry about that. Right. I think that accepting it and owning it is really
just
important.
owning it, just saying, hey, this is where I'm at. The thing that, listen, if it wasn't for Floyd Dawson and Anthony Witt and some of those counselors that Robin and I've gone to individually, I know you've seen some of those guys as well. We've got to seek support. We've got to be around people that can lift us up. And I know you hear us beating that drum all the time, and you're always going to hear us beat that drum because it's what changes our lives. It's what gives us that renewed spirit. Listen, all these things that I've been through over the course of my life, if I didn't have people there around me going, come on, Big A, you got this. You can do this. It's going to be okay. You're going to be all right. You're going to work through this. Things grow in the valley. There is no mountaintops where there is no valley. And that sense of encouragement. Listen, we were going through this stuff with Holly. People were bringing us meals. They were calling us, texting us, emailing us, saying, hey, hugging on us at church and saying, you guys have got this. You're going to get through it. Man, if we didn't have that, I don't know what we would do. The other thing that you've got to do is really engage in self-reflection. And this is a really hard thing to do, to be honest with yourself. And I tell coaching clients all the time, what are you lying to yourself about?
Ooh, that's good.
And we do that all the time. We sit out there and say, hey, it's not really that bad. It's really going to get okay. And you don't want to own it. And so I would say engage in some self-reflection, really understand what went wrong. Think about how you can grow from the experience. Sometimes, as we've talked about earlier, solitude can really be a powerful tool for personal growth. A lot of people don't want to do that. 2 years ago, I took off November and December, came back a different person as a result of it. There was solitude. I'm about to take a little trip and we're going to unplug. We're going to get away. You guys need to do that. You need to have some self-reflection. Do that with your spouse. Do it with yourself. Really kind of get away.
Can I mention about that, the solitude part? There would seem to be a danger with if you're feeling hopeless. one of the things you should do is spend some time in solitude. And I would encourage you to think about it like this. If you're going to go in solitude to listen to your own thoughts, that's probably a dangerous place to be.
I wouldn't do that. Yeah.
But if you're going to go in solitude to listen,
this is preventative.
To listen to what God has for you.
Yeah, it's different.
A totally different conversation.
Yeah. Because that tape it plays in my own head is devastating sometimes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, for
We're
sure.
our own worst enemy oftentimes. Some of you guys out there today have been confronted in the past or even presently with some financial challenges. There's some downfalls that have happened. I know it's one of the most devastating times in my career, was early on when I realized I didn't have the money to pay our bills. And I'm like, Robert, I don't know what we're going to do. Like, I literally don't know what we're going to do. And I'd borrowed a lot of money for our business, and we had bought a condo, and we had financed some cars, and it just all came crashing down. This was early in our marriage, the first couple of years we were married. But it was devastating. I mean, it was terrible. And I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't have mentors. I didn't have trusted advisors. I didn't have people guiding me and walking me through these things. When we have the kind of economic setback that's ahead of us that could possibly happen, and I'm not a pessimist, I'm very optimistic. Yeah. But the reality is interest rates are up and there's businesses experiencing challenges right now. There's some things that you can do to kind of work through that as well. Don't isolate and not share these finances with somebody that you trust. Get around people that you trust that can give you good insight. In most men's minds, their identity is tied to what they're doing. And so they feel like they're a miserable failure. Our identity oftentimes is tied to something. I'm not saying it should be. It really shouldn't be. But it is often tied to our success and our occupation. And we'll have to get back with that another day and have a podcast talk around that. But I just want to encourage you today to understand that your worth isn't solely defined by your financial status or your job title. Because if it is and those things are gone, who's left? Like, what is there if we tie it to those things? And so I just want to encourage you that money is a tool and it's used to live our life in a very effective way. And so the other thing, I know you love to talk about celebrating. Talk about that for a second and some of the things that we can do that would dismiss some of this feeling of I wasn't enough. How do we celebrate?
Well, I think that if we find ourselves in a feeling of hopelessness around financial challenges, right, that it's hard to remember what was good, honestly. Yeah. Right? I know I think it is important. I think that in the moment, that's a difficult thing to do. And I think in the moment, if we find ourselves there, that having the counselors around us, having those people speaking into us, leading into the word, and then I think it's also important to remember less about ourselves in that moment and more about like historically, right? What's God's provision, not just for you, but throughout generations.
Yeah, forever.
Forever.
Yeah.
God has provided.
That's what those promises in the Bible you talked about earlier.
I know.
Right? We can hang our hat on that.
Yeah.
And not think about just the present. Some of what I was trying to say is ways to keep us from getting in a sense.
Oh yeah, celebration
right?
there.
Yeah, that's
sure.
what I'm sorry I didn't
clarify
the question right. But
that's
it was some of the ways that we can win is doing those kind of things.
Yeah, we just went through a couple episodes ago, Kurt Stowers came on and we went through 10X is easier than 2X. And there's a book that accompanies that called The Gap and the Gain. And that speaks to that exactly. Is that so often we measure ourselves by what we didn't get to.
Right.
Versus what's actually been accomplished.
Yeah.
And how key that is in our lives as men. And that doesn't matter if it's money, we're talking about money here, but it could be in our marriage, the progress with our kids, the progress in our relationships with our adult parents, when they start to turn to children again. I mean, coworkers, employees, clients, if we take a moment and we think about those times in our life where we do have this gain and what God's allowed us to experience, man, it's way better than living in the gap and never being able to get where we think we want to be.
Wow. That is so good. That'll preach. That was good. That was good, man. Listen, thank you today for listening in on this episode. I want every man that's listening out there to think, it's okay to feel lost. It's okay to feel this sense of pain. It's absolutely okay, though, also to acknowledge it and go get help. Wally and I have both done that numbers of times. I'm sure we'll do it again, right? I mean, it's something that's ongoing. Matter of fact, I go sometimes when things are good because I don't want to miss something. I want to make sure that I don't have a blind spot. So I just want you to know you're not defeated. You're not down. You're not out. Listen, until we're done, until they lay us parallel and they put us 6 feet under, we're not done. Frank used to tell me, a guy worked for me, Mr. Walker, as long as you're kicking, you still got a chance. And that's what I want to tell you guys today. Listen, the journey from hopelessness to hope is a testament to the strength of the human spirit. And I know you guys have that. There is no question in my mind you've got that as well. And I want us to redefine what it means to be a man in this modern world and to pave the way for more understanding, have more compassion, and a more hopeful society as we go forward. Listen, you guys can do it, and I want you to go out there and do it today. And the reason is we want you to have that life of success and significance that we talk about each and every week.
Wow, if you're not amped up after that episode, I don't know what. So I hope, play off words there, that you all have a tremendous amount of hope yourself as you go forward. And if you do find yourself in a feeling hopeless, not necessarily a hopeless situation, but you find yourself feeling hopeless, please apply some of these principles we've learned here. And probably the most important thing you can do is reach out to somebody you trust and let them know. Do that first. Another thing you could do to be helpful to you is go ahead and join us in our private Facebook group for listeners of this podcast. So we have some questions on there that we bring up, that we cover. Big A and I are starting to do some lives on there soon and answering some questions you guys are posting in there. So please, you can join that by going out to viewfromthetop.com/group, GROUP, and that will redirect you right over to that private Facebook page where you can click the join button, answer a couple questions, and as long as you pass the smell test, we will let you in. So we look forward to seeing you and engaging with you over there. And I hope you all go make today amazing. Your stomach is like, what in the world? I don't even know. It's like a volcano.
It sounds like Orca the whale.
I don't know. That's not like Orca. Like Orca goes,
I don't know. That's what it's doing. It's 5:00. It's time for dinner.
Something, man. I don't know.
It's time for dinner.